Have you ever felt on the verge of the end? As if no prayer had been heard, and God's silence was the only answer? Maybe you're living in this moment right now, or maybe you've already been through it. But what if, right at that moment, an old message from decades ago was the answer you were hoping for? He was ready to give up. But then, Billy Graham's voice broke through the silence. This is not just any story. It's one of those testimonies that chills the soul. A broken man, emotionally, exhausted, lying in the dark, feeling like life had lost its meaning. Everything seemed pointless. No light, no direction, until in the middle of the night, the television turned on by itself, and there, on that black and white screen, was the voice that would change everything. Billy Graham. The same voice that reached multitudes in historic crusades now reached a lonely soul in absolute silence. And it was no coincidence. Because, as he himself said, God can use anything, even a forgotten transmission, to touch those he loves. If you're here watching this, maybe it's not by chance. Perhaps this story, this testimony of real transformation, is also a mirror of your own struggle. Maybe what he heard is what you need to hear it now. But before you reveal what happened in that room, you need to understand the pain this man carried. Because it is in this pain that most true transformations begin. Maybe you are experiencing exactly what he experienced. A tiredness that doesn't go away. An emptiness that no achievement can fill. A feeling of being surrounded by people but completely alone inside. And when everything seems dark, the only thing that remains is a silent cry. A plea that no one hears, but God hears. That's why this channel exists. Not just to tell stories, but to touch real lives. If you feel like this message is already speaking to you, leave a prayer request in the comments. Write with faith. Write sincerely. It doesn't have to be a long text. Just say what you need. Say, "Pray for me," or write the word "called," and we will pray for you. The comments here are not just texts. They are silent screams, confessions of the soul. And believe me, many people will pray with you. This is not just a video. It's a date, a community, a chance. Take advantage and leave yours like, because this makes this story reach other people who are going through the same pain. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, sign up now. Every week you will hear testimonies like this, real, impactful stories, with messages that seem to have been tailor-made for you. But now, take a deep breath, because what happened after that night was more than exciting. It was spiritual. It was inexplicable, and it starts exactly when he decided to pay attention to that voice. Work that doesn't fulfill, faith in pieces, no answers, just a heavy silence that seemed to have no end. That's how he lived. Every day he woke up with a weight on his chest, as if something invisible was pulling him down before he even put his feet on the floor. The alarm clock would go off. He would get up, take a shower, put on his clothes, and continue living like a zombie. From the outside, everything seemed normal, but inside, it was a battlefield. He was present in places, but absent in the soul. Smile out of obligation. I performed tasks like a robot programmed to survive. It was one of millions. A man trying to appear strong but being consumed inside. He worked long hours at a job that drained energy and killed purpose. What once seemed like provision was now prison. And the scariest thing, he no longer remembered what it was like to live with hope. Faith, which once had color, sound, and life, was now just a distant memory of something that he no longer knew if it had been real. The heart hardened over time. The mind drowned in doubts. And the prayers, oh, the prayers, they no longer came out with force. It was as if he were talking to himself, as if God had turned his face away, as if the sky was in silent mode. And even so, deep down, he still had a question that never went away. Is my life still fixable? It was this internal scream that accompanied him even when he slept. And often, he didn't even sleep. He spent hours lying down, looking at the dark ceiling of his room, feeling time slipping like sand through his fingers. He had lost the sparkle in his eyes. He had lost direction. But there was something he hadn't completely lost. Yet, something that resisted disappearing. The hunger for answers. This hunger was silent but constant. She hid behind the routine, the commitments, the bills, the forced smiles. But in moments of solitude, when the cell phone was off, when no one else was looking, she came back with strength. He wanted to hear from God, not just any religious voice, not ready-made phrases. He wanted an answer that touched the soul, that made sense, that broke that internal ice that had formed. But he didn't look for it anymore. I no longer prayed like I used to. I didn't go to church. I had already heard everything, that it was a lack of faith, that it was a sin, that it was spiritual weakness. But deep down, he was just tired. Tired of trying, tired of waiting, tired of believing and being disappointed. And it was at that point, at that exact point, that something happened. It was early in the morning. Everything was silent. The house, the neighborhood, the world outside. He was lying, down, with his eyes open, staring into space, wondering if it made sense to continue, wondering if anyone still cared, wondering if God really saw what he was experiencing. And then, out of nowhere, the television turned on. He didn't press any buttons. There were no controls nearby. It just called. And on the screen, with an old, grainy, black and white image, a familiar face appeared. But he no longer remembered the name. Era Billy Graham. His voice sounded powerful, as if he had passed through decades of silence. It was not a rehearsed preaching. It didn't feel like a show. It was simple. It was direct. It was true. And it was as if that message had been recorded just for him. God hasn't forgotten you. Even if you think it's all over, he still has a plan. These words entered his ears like spiritual thunder. It was as if time stopped, as if all the noise in the mind stopped for a moment just to let that sentence echo. He couldn't explain it. I didn't know what I was feeling, but he knew that something inside him, it broke. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't superficial emotion. Was break. As if the wall he had erected between himself and God had suddenly cracked. The heart started to speed up. The eyes filled with tears. The body trembled slightly. And then something even stronger happened. Billy looked at the camera and said, "You're the one watching me right now, maybe lying in a bed, in the middle of the night. This is for you." He was in shock. It was impossible. Not to feel that God was speaking to him. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't record that moment, but he never forgot that night. It was there, in that dark room, between the silence and the sound of an ancient preaching, that he felt God again for the first time in years. And it all started when he was about to give up. It all started when the hunger for answers was greater than the fear of hearing silence. It all started when the television turned on and a voice said what no one else could say. Now, I need to ask you, have you ever experienced something similar? Have you ever felt like everything was about to end, but something, a word, a song, a message, reached you at just the right moment? Maybe you're hearing this story for a reason. Maybe you too are hungry for answers. And maybe this story is just the beginning of what God wants to do with you. If this is bothering you in any way, tell me in the comments. He writes, "God spoke to me." If you felt something different in this video. He writes, "Called," if you feel that this story is also a mirror of your life. Or simply say, "Pray for me." I will read, and I will pray with you, and I'm sure other people will too. Because here, each comment is more than an interaction. It's a request, it's a cry, it's a calling. And who knows, today might not be exactly your night to meet God. It was by accident. He just wanted to make a noise. But when the voice said, "God knows your pain, and he still has plans for you," he froze. He remained motionless, as if time had stopped. It wasn't just a nice phrase. It wasn't just another sermon among many that he had already heard without paying attention. It was as if that voice had gone through the skin, the muscles, the bones, and touched the spirit directly. A shiver ran up my spine. The heart started to beat faster. The tears, which he no longer even remembered what it was like to cry, flowed without asking permission. It was him. It was up to him. That voice, which came from an old recording with hiss, blown image, and muffled sound, sounded more alive, more real, and more present than anyone else in his life at that moment. It was as if God himself had chosen that moment, that early morning, that forgotten television to pay a visit. At that moment, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I didn't know whether to get up or fall to my knees.
It was as if someone had found an old, hidden, covered wound and touched it with delicacy and truth.
He didn't want to believe it, but he couldn't doubt it, because only God knew what he was feeling. Only God knew the pain he hid from everyone. And now, this pain was being named by a voice from the past, by a preacher he didn't even remember existed. God knows your pain. Those words echoed inside him like soft thunder. It was as if all the pain he had accumulated for years was suddenly noticed, validated, recognized. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he wasn't alone. And the most impressive thing, it wasn't someone trying to fix him. It was just someone saying, "I see you." In that instant, the shame went away. The feeling of being invisible lost its strength. The guilt, which followed him like a shadow, stopped whispering in his ear. And all because of one sentence. "He still has plans for you." That part was the one that hurt the most, and the one that healed the most. Because deep down he believed that God's plans had expired for him, that he was past the point, that his mistakes, his spiritual coldness, his lack of constancy, his wrong choices, had stained history too much. But there she was, that phrase, like a bridge thrown between despair and hope. He didn't know if it was real, but I knew I needed to hear it, and he continued watching. Every word Billy Graham said seemed tailored to him. It wasn't a crowd listening, it was him, alone, in silence, and God. The preacher started talking about forgiveness, about how the past can drag us like invisible chains, but how Jesus came to break those chains. He talked about grace, about fresh start, about how the cross was not the end, but the beginning of a new chance. And he started to shake. It was as if someone was reading the most hidden pages of his soul, as if the chapters he wanted to forget were now placed before him, not to accuse, but to heal. He cried like a child, but it wasn't crying out of pain. It was a cry of relief, as if the weight was finally starting to fall from my shoulders, as if someone had finally entered that dark room with light. At that moment, he did not see a vision, nor did he hear an audible voice, but he knew, deep in his heart, that something was starting to change. He put his hands over his face, sobbing softly. He said the first sincere prayer in a long, long time. No script, no nice words, no religion, just a whisper, "Help me. I can't take it anymore." And it was enough. Because sometimes God doesn't expect us to know what to say. He just waits for us to open up and listen. And there, in that silence filled with the voice of a man who'd been gone for years, God began a new work. Silent, slow, real. He didn't become a saint overnight. He didn't quit his job immediately. He didn't get up from the room with wings on, but there was a flame that reignited, and she was, and only those who have been in total darkness understand the value. In the days that followed, he searched for that video again, revised. He cried again. He started looking for other testimonials, other voices, other stories of people who were also broken, but were reached. He wanted to understand, is this common? Are there more people like me? And that's when he found this channel. And if you are here now, maybe this is your moment too. Maybe you still don't understand why you're watching this video. Maybe it seems like just another content lost on the internet. But if something inside you is tightening, if the words are hitting differently, if you feel like this story could be yours, then it's because God is still speaking, and it's talking to you. That night, he didn't cry in pain. He cried in relief. For the first time, he felt he wasn't alone. And it was in that silent cry that something broke inside him. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't like in the movies. It was as if a wall made of concrete and fear had slowly begun to crack. A small, almost imperceptible crack, but enough to let light through. There, lying in bed, with the TV still on, he felt like he had been reached. Not by a pastor, not because of a doctrine, not because of any emotion, but for something sacred. For a voice that didn't speak to the ears, but to the soul. Billy Graham's voice continued, steady, calm, full of compassion and authority, and each word seemed to unearth a forgotten part of his spirit. He stayed like that for hours, unable to turn off the TV, unable to get out of that moment. With his eyes closed, with tears flowing, he just listened, like someone who finds a safe place after years in the desert, like someone who, for the first time, feels like they can stop fighting alone. It was deep dawn. No sounds outside that room, no distractions, just preaching. And there, In that darkness cut by the bluish light of the old television, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It was tenuous, fragile, but it was real. It was no longer that automatic faith, the one he pretended to have to please others. It was faith lit again, a faith with tears, a faith that bleeds but continues to believe. In the days that followed, he didn't go around telling everyone, didn't post it on the networks. He didn't become religious, but he woke up with something different, a presence, a constant reminder of that night. It was as if Billy Graham's voice continued to echo, even with the TV turned off, and in the silence of the morning, before the world started.
Screaming again, he listened. God knows your pain. He still has plans for you. These phrases accompanied him like hidden promises. And the most impressive thing was that he didn't know where to start, but he knew he didn't want to continue as before. He started slowly, reviewed the video. He wrote down some sentences. He opened a Bible that had been closed on the shelf for years, and there, with trembling fingers, he read a psalm that spoke exactly about pain and consolation. It was as if everything conspired to show that that night had not been an accident. It was as if that transmission had been sent to him, an old testimony from decades ago, now serving as an answer for someone lost in the present. He began researching more about Billy Graham, about the Crusades, about testimonies of transformation. He found stories that sounded like his, men who were on the verge of suicide, women who had lost everything, young people full of doubts, all reached by that same voice. And that made him stronger. He wasn't the only one. I wasn't alone. It was then that something curious happened. He started to remember things, childhood phrases, forgotten moments from when I listened to preaching on my grandmother's radio. An excerpt that said, "You may be far from God, but He has never been far from you." And that was like a reunion with history itself, as if God was pulling the thread back to the beginning. One day, he was on the subway, returning from work, tired, listening to music, on his headphones, when a thought came across that made him stop breathing for a few seconds. What if this is all a calling? That shook him. Not because he felt ready to experience something big, but because deep down he knew he had spent his life ignoring signs, diverting from purpose, running away from what really made sense, maybe out of fear, maybe out of shame, or maybe because I thought I wasn't worthy. But now, with everything that was going on, he felt like something bigger was about to unfold, as if that preaching was just the first page of a new chapter. And even without understanding the details, he wanted to turn the next page. Returning to church was still difficult. He felt uncomfortable. I thought I would be judged, that people would see the mistakes written on his forehead. But he started watching services online. He began to pray again. Simple prayer, without format. Things like, "God, show me, guide me, teach me." And little by little, everything around began to change. Not the world, but the way he saw the world. The way he dealt with pain, with work, with others. Conversations with colleagues changed tone. He started listening more, judging less, feeling compassion for those who previously only irritated. And all because of one night, a message, a voice. This transformation did not happen overnight. It was a process, a reunion with God, with faith and with himself. But the starting point was clear. That video, that morning, that sentence. He still has plans, and maybe now it's your turn. If you've made it this far, I want to ask you, comment the sentence below, "I am still God's Jubilee rekindling," or comment, "I am listening," if this story truly spoke to you. And if you need prayer, direction, a fresh start, write "called" in the comments. I will read every word, and I will pray with you, because just like that night changed his life, this could be the night that God begins to change yours too. What if that same voice is trying to reach you right now? Are you listening? That question never left his head. For days, it echoed like a soft, insistent beat, like a memory of the sky whispering among the noises of everyday life. He tried to ignore it, tried to follow the routine, tried to convince himself that maybe it had all been a coincidence. But the more I tried to remain silent, the more I felt like I was being called. It was not a call with noise, nor with a spectacle. It was subtle but constant, as if something inside him had awakened and now refused to go back to sleep. He looked around and nothing had changed. The work remained the same. The bills,
kept coming. Life's problems have not disappeared, but there was something different inside him. The way he saw things, how he felt things. Before, it just existed. Now he was starting to live, even if he didn't yet know what to do with it. It was then that he started to notice small signs. No angels appearing in the room, no audible voices from heaven, but specific phrases appearing in videos he had never researched. People telling him exactly what he needed to hear. Excerpts from the Bible that seemed tailor-made. And above all, a good restlessness. That feeling that pushes you forward, even when everything around you tells you to stop. And he started doing something he hadn't done in a long time. Writing. At first, it was just loose thoughts. Then they started to become prayers. No form, no theology, no pretension. Just him and God. Words that came straight from the heart. Sometimes in tears, sometimes in silence, but always sincerely. One of these nights he wrote, "Lord, I don't know where to start, but I don't want to live on automatic anymore." This sentence was the trigger for a new rhythm in his life. He started waking up earlier. I took 10 minutes, just 10, to listen to some excerpt from Billy Graham's messages before leaving the house. That became fuel. It was as if that voice, even from decades ago, still carried a living anointing, a spiritual authority that cut through the chaos of the modern world and spoke directly to the soul. And over time, something curious began to happen. People around started to notice. They didn't know how to explain it, but they said things like, "You look different. Your energy has changed. It's lighter." And he smiled, not knowing exactly what to answer, because the truth was, he was still broken, still struggling, with doubts, still facing difficult nights. But yes, there was something different, and that something had a name: hope. It was not a deluded hope. It was a firm hope, despite the chaos. A faith that bleeds, but remains. A silent certainty that God was rebuilding everything, His way, in His time. Testimonial videos have become daily staples. He cried with stories of others who had also been reached at unlikely times. He began to feel like he was part of something bigger, that there was a community of people like him, broken, tired, but found. And that gave me the strength to continue. It gave me courage not to give up. Little by little, he felt more comfortable talking to God out loud. He began to walk down the street talking to Him, as if he were talking to a father who hears everything. Sometimes he talked about his frustrations. Sometimes I just said thank you. But most importantly, he stopped pretending. With God, he was being real for the first time in many years. One night, returning home, he heard that part of the sermon again that changed everything. Billy Graham said, "You may have run from God. You may have ignored Him, but He still loves you, and He's calling you back." That tore his heart apart, because that's exactly what he had done. Run away, not because he wanted to despise faith, but because he felt he was no longer worthy of it. I thought I had already made too many mistakes, taken too long, strayed too far. But there it was, hitting hard. He still loves you, and that's what you need to understand too. Maybe you see yourself in this story. Maybe you're hearing that voice now, not from an old video, but through this one. And maybe you're feeling the same thing he felt that morning. A tightness in your chest, a lump in your throat, a tear that escapes without explanation. This is not for nothing. Are you listening? Can you tell this isn't just another video? That maybe this is the way that God found to remind you that He is still here, still has plans, still believes in you, even when you have given up believing in yourself. He started dreaming again, not grand dreams, but simple dreams. Live with purpose, have peace, to be used by God in some way. And these dreams came back slowly, like birds that lost their fear of landing. And he welcomed them with care, because now I knew it wasn't about speed. It was about permanence, about faith in the process. And it all started with a voice, a forgotten message, a sentence that tore the silence. If you've come this far, it's because something inside you has been touched. Maybe it wasn't just his story. Maybe it was yours too. Maybe, in the middle of this video, you have felt the voice of God talking to you in a way you can't even explain. And if that happened, then I want to invite you. Subscribe to the channel now. don't postpone. Here, you will find more than videos. You will find direction, comfort, truth, faith, real testimonies, messages that seem made for you. And maybe they really are. Leave a like now if this message spoke to you. It's just one click, but it helps this video reach more lives, just like it reached yours. And to let me know that you stayed until the end, comment below. I heard the voice. This sentence will show that you didn't just watch, but what did you feel? And I will pray for every person who writes this here. And before you leave, don't close the video yet. The next testimony is appearing here on the screen. Click on it. Because if this story was once strong, the next one might be even more like yours. I'll meet you there.